Skiing down an 8,000-meter mountain is ridiculous. I think many of us can agree on that statement, but in 2018, Hilaree Nelson and Jim Morrison would complete the first ski descent of Lhotse, the fourth tallest peak in the world, making history and forever changing the extreme sport. In 2022, the pair would decide to take on Manaslu, but the climbing season that would follow was dominated by heavy snowfall and avalanches, making it one of the most difficult years in the mountain's history. This is their story. Manaslu is actually considered to be one of the easiest 8,000ers, with many climbers using the mountain as preparation for its neighbor Everest. The mountain's long ridges and valley glaciers offer feasible approaches from all directions, and culminate in a peak that towers steeply above its surrounding landscape. But this is still an 8,000-meter mountain. After all, there are only 14 in the world, and they all come with their own unique challenges. 2022 was a historic year for Manaslu. Early in the year, the Himalayan database, who many look to for a reliable tracking source for reportable mountain summits, would make a public statement that from now on, it will only credit the summit of Manaslu to those who reach the highest point shown in a drone picture. This change in summit accreditation is recommended and supported by foreign and Nepali operators who we have consulted in Kathmandu. The statement came after numerous summit claims on the mountain had become controversial, as photographic evidence indicated that the majority of climbers in recent years claiming summits of the mountain had in fact stopped 20 to 25 feet short of the true summit. The results of this change are evident, as many climbers revisited the peak in 2022, with permits soaring to more than 400, more than twice the amount in 2021, and the most in the mountain's history. The mountain's most intimidating feature is the true summit, as the false summit is separated from the top by a long and dangerously sharp, concise ridge. This area is known for soft snow, bad weather, and avalanches. This would come to define the 2022 season. Hilaree Nelson was a 49-year-old American from Seattle, where she grew up skiing and climbing mountains starting at the age of 3. Her mountaineering career would span over 2 decades, and she would become one of the most decorated climbers the world has ever seen. But what made her special was she combined the two sports she loved, climbing and skiing. In 1996, she would become the European Women's Extreme Skiing Champion. In 2005, she would ski down from the summit of Cho Oyu, her first 8,000er. In 2011, it would be Denali, America's tallest peak. In 2012, she would become the first female climber ever to summit Everest and Lhotse in 24 hours. But in 2018, she would complete one of her most impressive and difficult challenges. After reaching the summit of Lhotse, the fourth tallest mountain of the world, Hilaree and her partner Jim would attempt to ski down from the top through the Lhotse Couloir. The challenge is obvious. Climbing mountains, especially those over 8,000 meters, was one of the most physically and mentally draining things a human can do. But deciding to carry your skis to the top of a mountain, where the oxygen is already thin, slowly deteriorating your body and mind, then making the conscious decision to strap them on and ski your way down the peak. It's madness. It is hard for me to express the difficulty of having the energy to ski or make jump turns above 8,000 meters. Many famous mountaineers have called Hilaree and her partner Jim Morrison's tenacity in the death zone as incredible. On September 30th, 2018, the couple would complete the first ski descent of Lhotse and culminate into one of her most famous films, instantly shooting her into legendary status. Later, reflecting on the accomplishment, Hilaree would state, "I've been on many expeditions, but only a surprisingly few have been objectives that kept me awake at night, that I would spend hours navigating Google Maps trying to gain some special insight. It's these select destinations, individual mountains, that I feel compelled to climb, to ski, to touch, to engage with both physically and mentally." Because of this accomplishment, Hilaree would be named as one of National Geographic's 2018 Adventurers of the Year, along with the 25 most adventurous women of the past 25 years by Men's Journal. But one of the things I find most fascinating about Hilaree's story is her ability to be a mother of 2 young boys, yet still maintain a mountaineering career. It is extremely difficult to reason putting yourself in dangerous conditions while having 2 young children. I always find that it's really hard for me to leave home and switch that identity, go from mom, family, busy to climber. I'm also happy and living intensely in these moments, and I have explained that to my kids, and we talk about all this stuff, and it means that much to me that it's worth it. Jim and Hilaree plan on climbing Manaslu in September of 2022, as the fall is the safest time period on the mountain. This is typically when the weather is the most reasonable, not the brutal cold of the winter or the unstable monsoons in the summer. Similar to all other expeditions, after Jim and Hilaree arrived at base camp, they would begin acclimating to the mountain through acclimatization trips, but the weather was the opposite of what they expected. There was almost a constant snowfall, making it difficult to climb the peak, causing many expeditions to abandon their attempts before starting. But this would not stop everyone. By late September, it had snowed for 15 days straight, and the snowfall was described as so intense that it was 4 to 5 feet deep near the death zone. Although the conditions were rough, the summit window was predicted to be only a few days this season, so Jim and Hilaree, along with many other teams, began making their final preparations for a summit push in late September. The first summits would come the final week of the month, with climber Kristen Harla describing the conditions. Manaslu was probably the hardest summit push I ever had. We had started out from base camp on Monday, and Tuesday we had a short climb to Camp 2. Heavy snowfall and the weather forecast looked like more snow that night. We talked about climbing down, as most others did, but luckily we decided to climb up to Camp 3 to see if the weather forecast was wrong. We knew it would be a long summit push from Camp 3, so we started out at 8:30 p.m. We had incredibly beautiful weather. Trails halfway up to Camp 4, but the last half we had to break trail and pull up the rope. We heard some avalanches when we climbed. Deep, heavy snow and no trails made it very challenging. Finally, we made it to the summit ridge. Many small avalanches when we stepped on the ridge, and I have to say, just getting to the 4 summit is not easy in this condition. We rappelled down, did the traverse, and climbed up to the middle top. When I climbed up there, heavy snow came down on me, and the last part to the real summit was not easy either. After 19 hours, we finally reached the summit. On September 26, just days after the first summit, Jim and Hilaree would eclipse the final ridge at 10:42 a.m., reaching the true summit of Manaslu in what was described as tough conditions. They quickly transitioned from climbing to skiing, wasting no time in the cold and wind. Their plan was to ski around the summit ridge and regroup with their Sherpa team, with Jim going first and Hilaree following him. The snow was thick, but very soft. Jim made it around the corner and watched as Hilaree followed him, but the powder under her skis started to collapse. Hilaree had started a small avalanche, and within seconds, she was swept off her feet and carried down a narrow snow slope on the south side. The south side was the direct opposite slope they had climbed, and there was no trail, making it nearly impossible for Jim to do anything but watch in horror as Hilaree tumbled off the sharp ridge and down the steep slope. The mountain has no natural breaks or safe points, meaning her body and skis were soon covered by a cloud of snow to where Jim could no longer see her, but there was no stopping her fall. Rescue efforts would begin immediately, but everything would be delayed as the same day another avalanche would take place between Camp 3 and 4 at 7,000 meters, taking the life of a Sherpa and injuring 12 other climbers. To make matters worse, the fixed lines from Camp 3 that go to the summit would be completely covered by snow, making it nearly impossible to descend the mountain until the lines were re-established. The following day, a search helicopter would spot a ski and some clothes at 1,900 meters below the summit, but because of poor weather conditions, they could not confirm if it was Hilaree. Jim would be flown to the location with 2 Sherpas the following day with a sinking feeling in his stomach. There, they would find Hilaree. It would take them an hour and a half to dig her out of the snow before her remains would be flown to Kathmandu. Jim would describe the events via Instagram and finish his posts with the words, "Peace be with us all. Pray for her family and community, which is broadly stretched across our planet. I'm devastated by her loss." The support for Hilaree would soon follow, as it was obvious what a climber, skier, and person the entire community had lost. But the 2022 climbing season was not over. A few days later after Hilaree's death on October 2nd, another avalanche would take place, originating above Camp 2, but eventually flowing down the mountain and covering base camp. The videos of the accident are truly frightening, and unfortunately another Sherpa would lose his life as he was descending from Camp 2 to Camp 1. 7 Summits would also report 2 more avalanches higher on the mountain, but thankfully, there were no injuries. This was the final day that anyone would try to climb Manaslu in 2022, as almost all expeditions that were still on the mountain decided to end their season and pack up for the winter. While we don't normally see the 8th tallest mountain in the world as a difficult peak to climb, 2022 was a representation of just how unstable even the simplest mountains can be. The season was absolutely brutal for anyone on the peak, even those that reached the summit. After a successful climb, one of the few mountaineers who did reach the top would describe the peak. Many say that Manaslu is one of the easiest 8,000 meters. Maybe, in good condition, but I think it is good to remember that the condition on the mountain have a lot to say about how easy the climb gets.